England's Prince Andrew refusing to talk to U.S. investigators about Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh boy. Fox 5 legal analyst Wendy Patrick joining us now with a deeper look into this case. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning.
So at the center of all this, obviously, Prince Andrew's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. And in terms of investigators, how are they trying to get information from the prince, given everything with the royal family?
Two great questions. So let me start with the first one. Guilty by association is the implication here. So beware of the company you keep. We say this to our kids all the time, don't we? Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. This is a case where Prince Andrew, in retrospect, he gave a disastrous BBC interview where he could have been more compassionate, admittedly, according to him. But the gist of it was, he did not know what was going on at the time. That's his statement. Well, now that the late Jeffrey Epstein, they're still looking at possible conspiracy theories. In other words, who else was facilitating this international trafficking ring? Prince Andrew is somebody who's been fingered in the investigation. So the question, Raul, your second question is, what do we do now? How do we get his testimony? That's easier said than done because he is in another jurisdiction. So as much as we might both prepare and even issue subpoenas here in the U.S., will the long arm of the law reach across the pond is the problem.
Yeah, can you do that? Can we do that?
Well, you'd need to have certain kinds of levels of cooperation. And one would be, of course, by some sort of a treaty, by mutual cooperation, not likely. The second might be if Epstein himself were charged criminally. He's not. So it is, and then of course the third would be, well, he could come to the U.S. and then he would be subject to a subpoena. He could contest it, but he could be served. I don't anticipate him coming to the U.S. anytime soon,
so
fighting that battle.
This week there were reports that he wasn't cooperating with the FBI, but then he said that, well, nobody's asked me to cooperate with the FBI. Who do you believe here?
Well, he no doubt has legal counsel, as he should.
Sure.
Given that he's a person of interest and directly been accused, whether or not it's beyond the statute of limitations, it's also out of the U.S. jurisdiction, but he's been directly accused of participating himself with an underage girl. So, of course, he's probably not thrilled and chomping at the bit to give an interview and talk to law enforcement, and his lawyers probably are trying to block that as well. But it's such a heartbreaking situation where he may have information that would help investigators uncover the truth and achieve some measure of justice for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, several of whom have been featured in many high-profile talk shows, and they basically, we feel their pain in not having any measure of justice now that they're not going to even have a trial. So if the prince does have information, what the victims' lawyers are calling upon him to do is to provide that information even without a subpoena. So it's more like an appeal from the court of public opinion than the court of law.
Yeah, and from anybody who's watching from the outside, you think, well, if you're not involved in this and there's something that you may know that may help in this case, then why don't you just speak up?
Well, legally, it's not as simple as that. And we're seeing the same thing by analogy play out in the impeachment trial. It's not as simple as saying, well, gosh, if you really didn't do what you're accused of, you should be willing to just speak freely. Well, that legally, many defense attorneys, in fact, all defense attorneys, that's the way I started my career, will say everyone knows anything you say can be used to incriminate you, especially if it's inconsistent with something you said on another occasion. And given the interview that Prince Andrew gave to the BBC, and he was widely criticized for that.
That didn't help at all.
No.
Not only did it not help at all, but what it did is it provided a baseline against which anything he now says can be compared. So his lawyers are probably not in favor in the slightest of him cooperating, even though he has said that he wants to.
You mentioned guilty by association because of the friendship with Epstein, but then there was that video of him coming out of Epstein's house, I believe.
And waving in the elevator. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And obviously you don't want to make assumptions because you don't know anything. He's just outside of it. But that doesn't look good. The optics of that with somebody who's trying to say he's completely innocent, completely removed from this, that doesn't look good. How does he argue against that? Explain what was happening there.
That's exactly right. I really hope this is a lesson to anybody watching that is wondering what kind of company they should keep, like we discussed at the outset. In terms of the chronology of events, you're right. Some of those photos and some of that association, even when he stayed at his house, was after Jeffrey had been convicted of being a child molester. So of course the prince knew at that point, and you're right, he didn't do himself any favors in the way he explained that decision in the BBC interview, which to his credit he's backpedaled from.
Saying it was convenient to
It's out there. That's right. It's out there. It was a very awkward interview,
Right.
but that is what he's up against now in terms of what can he now offer to investigators. Everybody would love to hear what he has to say, but he can't really be legally compelled at this point, and that's frustrating and heartbreaking for the victims.
Do we know what the Queen is telling her son
Well,
to
we
do, or
know-
Prince Charles is telling him to do? Do we have any insight on that?
Well, we know that she has consented, if not requested, that he step down from royal duties. That, of course, happened late last year.
Right.
But at this point, we don't know. We don't know as much as we'd like to.
But yet he
except
still gets
that-
the royal money that, like, for example, Harry and Meghan, they're like, oh, we're out of that life, and they're not
Well, maybe
getting
he
the
gets
money.
their
the
share
tax
now
money.
that they've moved to
It's
Canada.
just-
I don't know. Trying to make
It's all very bizarre.
It is.
all right.
Palace intrigue, as they say.
Indeed.
Literally.
Wendy Patrick, thank you so much. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.